Hello everybody. Sorry for being late. I was just grabbing some water and a drink as well. So I got some iced coffee. And I've got some water. So we're ready to go. Switch on over here. Hello. Good to see you all. Hope you're all doing well. We are listening to some beautiful music. The newest music from Marika. Link found in the description below. She just sent it to me on the release. So thank you so much, Marika, for doing so. So let's listen to it together. Some beautiful music from what I can tell. So yeah. Appreciate that a lot. Hello, Eisendrag. Hello, Pewdie. Hello, Sheila. Good to see you all. How is everyone's summer going? I became a lobster in just 3 days. I have not become a lobster myself. I am being a little bit more proactive with like sunscreen and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm doing a little bit better than I usually do. But to be fair, like we went through like a heat wave and then immediately it came down and now it's gonna rain for like 4 days straight or something like that. So welcome to Belgian weather, I would say. Self-care? Yes, you need to. Oh yeah, especially if you're like a milk bottle like myself and like the slightest lick of the sun just like burns you, you know? Can't be dealing with that. Hello Darpan, good to see you as well. Did anyone watch? I mean, okay, first of all, I'm not the biggest PlayStation fan, but I just stumbled upon like the live stream yesterday where they were doing God, what was it called again? PlayStation, I don't know, PlayStation Showcase or whatever they had going on. They were showcasing, so like their one last thing was like the new showcase of like the new God of War coming out. Pretty interesting. State of Play, that's it. Thank you, Pewdie. It was pretty good. I think I missed the first thing. Because it was like Wolverine. To be honest, like I don't really care about like any sort of superhero kind of stuff anyway, so I kind of jumped in late, which was like to my I think to my benefit, honestly. Because I don't really care about those games. But then at the end, I didn't even know what I was expecting really. And then at the end, just hearing like 20 minutes of like gameplay of just like the newest God of War. That was really good. I was really surprised by the animation, like the facial animation, especially. That was really well done. Really well done. The combat actually, I don't know why. So, okay, I have not played any of the newer God of War games, right? But I think the combat kind of was very reminiscent of the old God of War games. In a really weird way. Like, I don't know, it felt like a little bit more arcadey, a little bit more, I don't know. Yeah, floaty, I would say. Not floaty. That's make it sound so bad, but yeah, I don't know. Pretty cool to see that. Yeah, really impressed with the demo, with all the tech and all that kind of stuff. It's always cool to see like a new blockbuster game just showcasing everything, you know. And especially with like a 20-minute, like uninterrupted gameplay stuff. That was awesome. You could do a sick Kratos cosplay. Yeah, but I kind of got the dad bod going on, you know? So I could be like dad bod Kratos or something like that. But I don't think Kratos is made for that just yet, you know? Maybe this is Kratos when he's like in retirement, you know? And I don't know, give him like a couple of 100 years. That's me. I'll do that cosplay. Oh, that's true. Il from Moonfish is also looking really cool. Before, people didn't even believe that Atomic Heart is real, and now we get this. Yeah. Oh, are they the same makers from Atomic Heart? I didn't even realize that. I don't know why I didn't make a connection. Interestingly enough, Atomic Heart is probably the game that made me rage the most in a long time. Just because there was one specific quest where they had the wrong waypoints, and the open world in that game was so fucking annoying that I honestly couldn't deal with that game. I was really on board up until that point, and then that one point, that one quest, ruined me. Oh my god. But that's also, maybe that's more an indication of me being more impatient with games rather than the game being bad, you know? So let's not blame the game 100% for that one. Yeah, but that's cool. I also weirdly like that the new trailer from Ill is less gross than some of the previous stuff we've seen for that game. It is still gross, don't get me wrong. It is still gross, but I feel like it's not as gross as previous things we've seen from that game. In a good way, because I can't deal with gross games. This is just me me complaining about being an old man, you know, even when I'm not that old. But yeah, it is really impressive that like Moonfish, like a relatively new quote-unquote studio, is doing this, right? Yeah, really impressed by it. Disregard anything that I said about like not being a fan of like the first game and all that kind of stuff, right? There is still just the sheer impressiveness of just launching those games that are like really well received and then going to do something like so different, right? So massive shout out to them. Really good stuff. Darpan is saying, when you see the frame by frame, the showcase for God of War, the animation, the facial work is so good. You don't even have to look at the frame by frame. I think honestly you could just see it by watching it. Like I didn't even like replay it or anything like that, and I was just like thoroughly impressed by like how expressive the facial work was. They did a really good job. Yeah, really good stuff for that entire team. So congrats on the reveal for that, because that's always a big moment. And again, I'm not up to date with like any of the PlayStation stuff going on, right? So I didn't really know that was gonna happen. So I kind of felt like I was a kid again, you know? It's like, oh my god, here's like a new thing. That's awesome. Like the new big thing, especially. And Paolo is saying, I like Rayman, so beautiful. Yep. Yeah, apparently like a couple of my colleagues still work on that. Or have worked on that, I should say. Or they are involved. I don't know what their involvement is. I haven't talked to them in a while, but it was really cool to see that. Yeah, that still people that I've worked with are now like involved with making beautiful new things. So yeah, that was cool. Yeah. Oh, and then we also got to see like the first game of Unseen, right? Which was really interesting. Not a game that necessarily I would play, but I think they're doing something really cool with the art style, and yeah, I'm really curious how this game going to evolve, because it is a big momentous moment of that studio. So it's going to be really interesting to see how we get like more reveals, and I want to know more about the world and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Oh, that's right, the new Tomb Raider as well, McVell. Yeah. I have not played Tomb Raider. Oh my god, I have not played Tomb Raider. When was the last one? I think Tomb Raider 3 or something like that was the last one that I played. Which is like... Oh my god, that's like more than 20 years ago, I think. Like the early Tomb Raiders, you know? Like low poly Lara Croft and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. It is really cool to see. Yeah. This is the thing. Like this season that we're in right now. Oh my god. Oh my god. So excited. So excited to see like all the stuff that devs have been built up in the background to now come out, right? And the reveals and all that kind of stuff. There's also Outlast, like, but with dinosaurs. I thought it was Dino Crisis at first. I thought it was a reboot of like an old IP that scared the shit out of me when I was a kid. I think I got a demo for that game, and I didn't even complete the demo because I was so scared of it. Oh my god. But yeah, that's true. That is true. It was interesting the transition between Tomb Raider and then going into dang it, I forgot the name of the game. Like, well, Outlast, but with dinosaurs, right? Because I honestly thought that it was like an extension of the first trailer because Lara Croft has dinosaurs as well, right? Yeah, that was cool. Sounds like I need to get caught up on some stuff. Oh yeah, this season we're gonna get bombarded with like a whole bunch of stuff, right? Because I'm not even up to date with like all the latest timings, but I think this Friday it's gonna be Summer Games Fest, right? That's also a big one, and then there's gonna be a lot more showcase. I think Xbox is gonna do a new one like next month or something like that. Like, oh my god, there's so much stuff coming. But yeah, really excited. For people that are new to the chat, we are going to be diving into some community feedback. So I'm an environment artist myself. I've worked in the games industry for the past 10 years. I love to spend my free time giving feedback and helping other people do exactly the same. But if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat, right? Yeah. Like we got some questions in the chat for Beauty's asking the same thing. So always was curious, do studios read chat reactions on reveals? Studios, yeah, they probably keep track. Maybe not reactions. I don't think reactions. Because honestly, if you look at the state of play, I really quickly closed the chat because a lot of the chat was just like, hey, I want Destiny 3. And it's like, what? Like, that was literally like 60% of the chat. So at a certain point, I just closed the chat and I was like, okay, let's not look at it. It's just irrelevant, right? Because I think if you're gonna base something, anything at all, on like a chat in general, like a massive chat where 700,000 people are watching, I don't think you're gonna get any representative data out of that, honestly. But they do have like analytics, like how many people were like sharing the trailer or watch the trailer live across all media platforms. Like they do have like all those analytics to see if the trailer did well, if they need to do certain things to the trailer, or if certain marketing channels do better than others. Like they have a lot of data and analytics behind it, for sure. When it comes to the chat itself, I don't think so. I don't think so. But I might be wrong though. I think what you're probably gonna get is that there's probably gonna be people watching to kind of get a general sentiment of the chat, right? I think that's probably gonna be it. But yeah, I would assume so. It was funny and sad when they showed God of War. First it was FFF, and after Kratos revealed its peak and WW. That's the thing. Like, you cannot trust what the chat is doing, you know? Because for all you know, there might be like 50% bots in there. Who knows? Who knows, right? Emistart is saying, and I think I agree for the most time, if you look at like any big chats, right? Like massive events where a lot of people are just able to say whatever they want, a lot of it is just dumb. Just dumb stuff, you know? And even if there is going to be value, if someone is saying like an actual like genuinely helpful thing, it's going to be gone by the time that you read it anyway. So it almost feels like there's no point to it, you know? I think that's why, if you want to get a sentiment, that's why you go to, I don't know, smaller reaction streamers, or maybe to like certain outlets, or you go to Reddit afterwards, or you find things in those places, right? Any predictions for Friday? I have no idea. This is the weird thing. Like, ever since I've been a dev, I like watching those things, but I'm not as involved with, oh my god, this thing is coming out. Oh my god, I need to play this. Oh my god, I need to do this, you know? I'm more just like sitting back and enjoying the hard work that fellow devs and friends are doing, and I just celebrate that in my own little circle, you know? So I'm not necessarily a gamer anymore, to be honest, right? Like, I'll play the occasional game, Um, but yeah, that's about it. And like, if there is something that will pique my interest from like any game show out there, it will probably be like 1% or something like that, right? Because first of all, I'm super critical. I've always been like that, and I'm probably going to continue to be like that forever. As we will see later on when I give community feedback, right? Same thing applies to games. Like, if I'm going to be spending my time on a game, I'm going to be very picky with the game that I choose, right? Or I'll play a game that is just like, I don't know, really easy to get into so that I can just turn my brain off and just do the thing, right? Because yeah, I mean, I would love to open it to the chat though. Like, what do you all think is going to be shown on Summer Games Fest? Maybe we can actually look at some rumors or some stuff. Because I would be curious to see. Summer Games Fest. 2 weeks ago. Maverick Games Clutch looks like a good racing game. I think they are a new studio and they're using Unreal Engine 4 for the whole game. Yeah. They were like a local studio. A couple of my friends work for Maverick now. Because they were a Leamington Spa studio, right? Or like, well, they're really close to Leamington Spa. So a lot of the devs that I got to interact with, not only from the studio that I worked at, right? We kind of got together and you get to know each other. So a couple of our friends that we used to play board games with, like they work there and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, really, really excited to see their game released. Not sure what the game is gonna be though, right? Like we didn't really see gameplay, so I'm gonna be very cautious with that kind of stuff. But yeah, it did look like a really good reveal. Especially once they kind of showed off like the vibe that you get from a game. I think the vibe was really good. So yeah, I'm curious what they're gonna show off, and yeah, hopefully it's gonna go well for them. But yeah, they are using Unreal Engine for the whole game by the looks of it. And Focus and Fracture is saying hopefully Witcher 4 and Metro. The new Metro game. Yeah, Witcher 4. Witcher 4. That feels early, no? That feels like way early. I don't know. Because they've done the tech demo with Unreal Engine, right? When was that again? Oh my god, time. That was like a year ago, right? Was it even longer? No, I think it was a year ago. So yeah, Witcher 4. Yeah, I mean, that would be interesting to see. I saw some Wolverine gameplay and that looks super fun. Yeah, I've seen a lot of people being really excited for Wolverine. Which is really, really cool to see. Control 2 from Remedy Entertainment. Yeah, but do they have a split development? Because they're still doing support for... Oh no, they're not doing support, right? They're doing... Oh no, I guess that is Control 2, right? Like the... Or is that a spin-off? I can't remember. Because they did show off a little bit of that yesterday, I think, too. Was it? Yeah, that was in State of Play as well. What was that game called again? Control 2? Resonant. That's it. Yeah. I was confused because they did the whole FBC Firebreak thing as well. So I don't know if they were still developing on that. But yeah, that looks interesting. I gotta say, Control Resonant, like the first release was really weird. Like the first reveal, I wasn't on board at all. But the more that I'm seeing of it, I'm like, okay, like it's starting to slightly grow on me. Not that I'll buy it on release, but I think it is heading in an interesting direction, you know? Because the thing is, it looks really nice though. It looks really nice. Paulo is saying the same thing that I was gonna say. Like, I love the first control. The first control was really, really good. The setup, the intrigue, like the mystery around it, right? So I'm really curious to see what they're gonna do with this one. And it is honestly very bold to do something that it goes into like a different direction, right? Sure, it's still set in a controlled universe, but it seems like it's like a different spin, right? Like more melee focus and all that kind of stuff, which is pretty cool to see. Pretty cool to see. But yeah, the way that they set up like their cinematic and the environments and like the shots that they actually have looks really, really cool. So I think they're doing. It's one of those studios where they really know how to visually sell you an image, right? The intrigue, the way that it's rendered, the compositions of everything. I feel like it's a really strong studio that knows what they're doing and very fundamental focused. Same with Bungie, by the way. I've always appreciated how fundamental focused they were when it comes to their artistic approach. Like their use of color and contrast, and it's always really, really good. Yeah, let's have a look. So let's have a look at some of the rumors. Let me switch on over anyway. Assassin's Creed codename Hexe. It's been a busy time with Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced. That was gonna be, yeah. More from Divinity. Oh, Haunted Chocolatier. That would be good. My partner would be so happy if they show, something on the Haunted Chocolatier side, on that game. That would be awesome. Oh yeah, Marvel's Blade from Arcane. We haven't seen anything about that apart from like the release stuff, right? Intergalactic, yeah. Mass Effect 5. I didn't even, is this speculated or the developers working on the next entry? Yeah, it feels like even if they're working on it, that feels like super early to do something around that, right? Or it would be like such an early teaser that it's gonna be another 4 years of development or something like that before they release it. That would make no sense. So, yeah. Far Cry 7. Well, I'm still on the high on Complete Fantasy, we need to talk about Far Cry 7. Okay. Interesting. The rumor will suggest that it could be coming as soon as next year, but as Ubisoft goes through a period of restructuring, it's never been murkier time to be a fan of the IP. Yeah, I mean, yeah. I have no idea how that's gonna happen with like all the restructuring and all the stuff that's going on, right? Yeah. And yeah, this is the thing. They always do a Ubisoft Forward, right? So if they want to do big stuff, they'll probably do it at a Ubisoft Forward, not on Summer Games Fest, I would assume, right? Hello, I see you have 2 places for a $440 mentorship, but it's not the course? No, that's not the course yet. We are getting close to actually releasing it. I think the site is done. We will probably release the site tomorrow, but we will not be going into the course yet. We are still looking to polish things up before we go actually into the release of the course. So it will take a little bit of time yet. Oh my god. Are we expecting anything to see from like the Elder Scrolls? There's no way. There's no way. No, because they would definitely reveal that in like a Microsoft thing, wouldn't they? There's no way that they would actually show that in like Summer's Games Fest. Like that is like one of their biggest studio reveals they can do. They are not gonna do that. They are not gonna do that on like a Summer Games Fest. I'm assuming they're gonna keep that for like an exclusive thing for themselves, I think. Nope, price has not been revealed yet, Marmoset, so keep your eyes on the website. We will make some announcements soon. I would expect it on TGA only. The Game Awards? Yeah, potentially. Yeah, potentially. Yeah. Yeah, that also makes a lot of sense, right? It would either be like an Xbox thing where they release it themselves and they make it all about it, or they do like the big thing from the Game Awards, right? That makes a lot of sense. November 19th for GTA 6. I am more excited on GTA 6 behind the scenes more than the game at this point. What are you interested in behind the scenes? I mean, the same kind of counts for me as well. Like, I'm not really on board with the hype train for GTA 6. I'm just more curious to see what it is going to be doing in terms of the tech and the price and the development about it. That would be cool. Yeah. I guess we'll just have to wait and see what some of the things are going to be revealed. Divinity. Oh yeah, Clockwork Revolution. Ace Combat. That was also in the PlayStation Showcase as well, right? So I don't think we're going to see that in that showcase anymore. Some Fable stuff. Clive Barker's Hellraiser. Oh my god, Clive Barker? I have not heard that name in like ages. Monster Hunter Wilds. Fallout 3 Remaster? In development? Interesting. I didn't even know about this. But they'll probably do the thing where they just outsource like the main part of the development to another studio and then just keep like a core team just in charge of the development, right? That's not going to be made internally. I would love to see how they optimize everything when it comes to the promise of more and more buildings to be physically accessible without loading screens. I mean, I don't think... Here's a weird thing, right? Like, I don't think that is necessarily gonna be like a big bottleneck per se. It just depends on the density that you would expect, right? Because yeah. I mean, like a massive city, yeah, for sure. I mean, it is going to be a technical challenge, right? I don't want to say that that's going to be easy. But with the amount of funding that they have, I don't... Yeah, I'm curious to see. Spider-Man 2 did it really nicely. Again, I have no clue. How did Spider-Man 2 do it then? Because I think also, like... You don't from like an open world design perspective, you don't want every game to be accessible, every house to be accessible anyway, right? Because then people are just like running around into empty houses where there's just like a bunch of furniture but there's nothing to do. So that's kind of the issue. The same thing in Cyberpunk, right? You can actually go into a lot of locations, but in a lot of locations there's just nothing to do. It's just like set dressing, right? And I think that's not the point of a game like that. So that means that you almost need to design content around the idea that, let's say, every building is gonna be like accessible and all that kind of stuff. That is honestly the part that I'm more worried of. Because in the grand scheme of things, right? You making a building and then let's say making it accessible and having it render and be performant, that is actually the easy part, in my opinion, of the chain, you know? Maybe I'm biased because I would be in charge of the person building the stuff, right? And like optimizing it. But I think, honestly, that is the easiest part of the whole chain, because if you then have to think about, okay, the content in there, the rendering first, but then also the content and side quests and procedural quests and like all that kind of stuff, making it all performant and loading in with like a bunch of like unique NPCs and all that kind of stuff that are going to be more expensive than just like your normal average NPC that has like limited behavior. Like how pedestrians have full-on conversations. Imagine walking into a random living room that doesn't relate to the main story and you can see people living and talking. If they pull that off, No, you don't want that. I think that's a weird thing. Like, so that's one of the bigger promises that like AI is thinking to deliver, right? Is that you can have these like very in-depth like conversations with like NPCs, but to think about it from like a design perspective, right? It's what would be a good comparison to art? It's almost like saying like, hey, here's your focal point, but we actually scattered like 20 other focal points next to it. Have fun. You know? A player will get overwhelmed really quickly. What you want to have is you want to have your hero characters, and then you have your side characters, right? They're not going to be as important as the hero characters. And then you have like some additional side content that you can spend like a little bit of time on, but that's more like filler. And the rest of the NPCs are just there for set dressing. Because from a game design perspective, it doesn't make sense to have like a full-on conversation or even have the option to have a full-on conversation with a lot of the NPCs in the world, because that would make the whole world just, what's the best word? It would decrease the contrast between like an interesting character and an uninteresting character. Because if everyone is interesting, then no one is, right? So it's really interesting. Like, I think, and I was the same too, right? Like, you kind of want to have, you always want to imagine that like, you would have like this living world where like everyone has their own kind of jobs and all that kind of stuff. But I think there is a limit to where that's actually a detriment to the player. Maybe not the player in particular interacting with these conversations rather than spectating and listening in. Well, but if you're doing that, right, then you're basically setting up like a whole bunch of unique conversations for no point at all, right? I mean, no point is like an overstatement, because you definitely want to have some of that like random banter on the street so that you can create this living feeling, right? But actually, I don't think that's what they should be going for, and they shouldn't be doing that, in my opinion. But hey, we'll see. We will see. Hello, Arvid. That does make sense with like diminishing returns. Yeah, I mean, that's also why you see a lot of these like really easy to do procedural quests, right? Like Cyberpunk 2077 has these quests where like a random car spawns, you need to take over the car, you need to drive it to a location, and then you get credits from like this person, right? From like a narrative perspective, doing these, or like even from like a developer perspective, these are like relatively easy to set up, right? Because once you have the logic, you just pick random cars, different, I mean, I'm oversimplifying it a bit, but like you just take random cars, random locations, and random drop-off points. And then every 5 to 10 times you do this, you then just have like a unique piece of conversation that then unlocks you to do that for like 20 cars more, right? So actually from like a developer perspective, we're not spending a bunch of time on like these car chases. We're just spending a lot of time on the first one because we're introducing you to a new mechanic. We're spending time on like somewhere in the middle where like you get an update for the quest and you need to talk to the person that's there. Then at the end with the whole payoff, then you have like another check-in with the NPC, right? So that makes a lot of sense. That's sort of the stuff that you can do with like a skeleton crew maintaining a game like that, right? That makes a lot of sense from like developer perspective. Imagining that you have to set up like unique conversations for like hundreds, if not thousands of NPCs. Oh my god. That is going to be mental. Mental. Because again, it's a trade-off, right? If we set up 100, I think that's enough to feel, to have enough variation so that if you are walking around in the world, that you can actually, you don't get to hear the same conversations, right? Unless you play the game for really long, but then it's not going to bother you because you don't care about that interaction anymore, right? Compared to if it was only like one conversation and everyone's just saying like, hey, how are you doing? In the same tone. It's like, oh, That's really awkward, right? You think AI might help in that area? No, it's too unreliable for this stuff. It's sort of what we said before, right? It's not what you want either. Because you could basically set up your NPCs to have like full-on AI interactions if you wanted to. But I can tell you the reason why no one's doing it. Just because that's not what the player wants. Like, honestly. Being able to have an interaction with everyone that you meet on the street in like a GTA-like game, that sounds like a waste of time. It doesn't sound like fun to me. Plus also how unreliable like AI is in its responses, right? Because then you basically need to think about it from like a security perspective, and now you have probable like built-in security issues with like any NPC that you add to the game, right? Unless you do like very specific training and like lock them down and all that kind of stuff. But yeah. Dun, dun, dun. Hello, Arvid. Sorry. Sorry that I missed you. But yeah, like there's gonna be some really interesting developments. Yeah, there's gonna be some really interesting developments when it comes to this kind of stuff, right? Like, because I think open worlds have been around for like a decent amount of time, but I still feel that we have barely scratched the surface of what an actual genuine open world can really feel like, right? Like one that really evolves with your actions and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's going to be really, really interesting to see what is going to happen there. Powertail is saying, I find this funny because for the longest time I felt like people wanted games to have everything and super realistic, but in an attempt to do that, we've lost the game. But then 007, which has some amazing features in game design, people are complaining about bad cloth sim. It's so annoying. Well, here's the thing, right? Like, that's also why you, coming back to an earlier conversation, that's probably why developers or like people in PR don't really watch like a chat when like a game gets announced, because a lot of that is just going to be that stuff, right? Like, cloth sim looks like ass, you know? And it's like, it's just people looking for an excuse to like be the funniest person to be able to comment first with like a unique comment on a game, right? They're just literally playing like the internet brownie points game. That's what they're doing. And they're having fun with it, right? I'm not trying to take that fun away, but then having to take into account that those are like real interactions, I think we need to disregard that for a little bit. Because I mean, even what you're saying, right? Like in your example, I think that is actually one of the cleanest examples of like genuine feedback, right? If the cloth simulation looks bad, that is something that is actually like pretty actionable for like a development team, right? Because I can tell you that like a development team might actually agree with some of those points. But here's the thing. Sometimes what also happens, or like not sometimes, all the time in game development, is we need to balance performance versus gameplay, right? Because yeah, a cloth sim might look shitty, but if that cloth sim means that, hey, we're gonna run this at like a lower frame rate, or we're gonna adjust the collisions so that if we're using like simpler collisions, that can have like a big impact if we do like cloth sim on like a whole bunch of surfaces, right? Which yeah. And that is game development, right? Like in some cases, like running more performative like cloth simulations might mean that you can render more people on screen. And if you then are rendering a scene where, let's say, you have like a whole party going on and there's like, I don't know, 100 characters on screen, right? Having to then do like less good cloth sim in return for rendering that many characters on screen, I think that's a good payoff, right? MH294 is saying there are some genuine criticisms from gamers that get disregarded from some devs, but honestly, there's so many rage baiters and people who just get angry for the sake of being angry that I can't blame them. Well, yeah, here's the thing, right? And even as like a single developer, well, I'm talking specifically about like AAA, right? As a single developer, even if you wanted to even if you okay, let's take this from like two sides, right? There might be a very, very, very good reason for why you had to do the thing that people are criticizing you for. But A, is out of your control because it probably got overridden by like someone else making the decision, right? Or there might be, like I said before, like a good sacrifice of why that is, right? So yeah. Because basically what happens a lot is that, and I've seen this so many times, and this is very interesting from like a dev perspective, right? Is that you'll see an initial announcement. People get angry about a very specific thing in that announcement, saying that, hey, I don't want my game to be X, right? Cool. Developers have already thought about that and they're working really hard on getting X in the game, right? But it's too early to show off. And then once, like a couple months later, X gets added to the game, then Reddit is like, yes, we've done it, guys. We've done it. We've made it work. It's because we cried out so hard that the devs listened to us. That is also a very interesting phenomenon that happens a lot. Where, no, we're like still building the game and those features will be revealed later, but we can't reveal them now because they're very early on development, right? That happens a lot as well. So yeah, there's a lot of moving parts there. And I think honestly, as a dev, you just have to disregard a lot of criticism because A, it's already been addressed. B, it doesn't make sense for the game that you're making. Or, you know, C, sometimes it's just like there's no room for it, you know? It's like it might even be a good idea, but we just don't have the time to make it. But yeah, that's the thing. Like, we talk about it a lot in like the negatives, right? We talk about it a lot in like the negatives when it comes to the interaction between community and developers. But honestly, there is so much good stuff that happens there too, you know? Like, oh my god, the amount of like genuine, like really good ideas or, you know, like feedback that you get from like a really engaged community, there's honestly nothing better than it. And if you then have to take like rage baiting as a part of that, I think a lot of developers will rather take that than no feedback at all, honestly. Aika, welcome Aika. Good to see you in the chat. Has anyone checked out Fatekeeper? Looks amazing, not gonna lie. Yep. I am following them actively. It's one of my games that I'm like, it's one of probably my 1% games where I'm like, ooh, yeah, I want to play that when it comes out. Looks really interesting. Even though, like, I'm not even a fan of, like, the very sluggish, like, kind of melee-based, yeah, attacks that they have going on. Still, super interested in the game. I want to play it. Hello, everyone. A first time being here. Hello, Yura. Good to see you. Good to see you. A lot of cool games from State of Play as well. Yeah, we talked about it in the beginning. God of War facial animations were looking really, really nice. Bum, bum, bum. So many video games coming. We need a good PC and money. Yes, yes. I'm just excited for TR now. What the hell is TR? Oh, Tomb Raider. Okay. It's been a year since I saw Lara resembled her classic sassy identity, both look-wise and personality. Yeah. Yeah, I'm curious to see what they're gonna do with that. Like I said, it was been 20 years since I played the last Lara Croft game, so got no attachment to it whatsoever. But I'm always excited when, you know, like, games are awesome. You know, that's all I can say. It takes so much fucking blood, sweat, and tears to kind of get all these games over the finish line and to have them look as good and to be as polished as they are. Oh, I love it. All right, enough yapping about games. Let's actually jump into some feedback. so that we can hopefully get you all to make games in the future too, you know? Power Tails on the trigger. Raise your hands. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. Before we go into it, Hirishi, how do you get through the boring parts of a tutorial? Like parts where the modeling parts are getting repetitive, but you fear that you might miss something too? It's gonna be very simple. Just skip through the boring parts. You know how I watch tutorials these days? I just skip through the stuff that I need and then I click away. Because for me, unless you have like a tutorial going on in the background, right? Because it's been a long time since I've actually listened to a full tutorial, gotta be honest. I think it is more important to look for the resource that you need in the moment, rather than looking at the resource that you might need in the future, perhaps, maybe, you know? So I just prioritize my focus on, hey, I need to know this. I'm going to look up a tutorial that teaches me this. Cool, I know how to do this now. Continue on my own way. Oh shit, I need to know this as well. Look up a different tutorial. Teaches me how to do it. Cool. That's how I basically do tutorials. I just go through like the thing that I need, and that's what I'll skip to. As much as I can. If you're doing a full course, set it to 2%, or skip to the part where, I don't know, it gets interesting again, right? Because sometimes there's going to be repetitive stuff in a tutorial. Skip it. Because also, like, if you miss something, you can always scroll back, right? Yeah, no worries. Okay, Power Tail first. Let's have a look. Yes, I think the main question for you this time, Power Tail, was how do we polish this, right? Basically, how do you push it to the next level? And I think one of what we talked about before, right? Like last week or the week before that. Let's see. I think it wasn't last week. I think it was the week before. A lot of this stuff is still going to be applied, right? So, clutter, adding more clutter to the scene, making it feel more lived in, have more hanging stuff, have more like little trinkets that you can just scatter around, right? Make the scene feel more lived in. That would be one. Number two, blending. I talk about this a lot, but look at any surface and try to blend it with the surface next to it, however you can, right? So that means if you're doing dirt here, but there's no dirt on like the rocks here, you're not doing blending correctly, right? Because we always want to have dirt influence like the areas around it. So if you're going to have dirt here, which is cool, have dirt on this edge as well. Same thing here. Because what that does is it's going to eliminate this like really harsh edge that you have. But this can be applied to literally any surface you see. Right? And in certain areas, you're doing a really good job at it. But then also, if let's say you're doing some blending here, then I also want to see blending on top of the wood too. And if you're doing, basically another tip, always have vertical gradients on any surface. Any building, any wall, whatever, there's always, especially in an area like this where it's going to be grimy and dirty, people are going to be kicking dirt against like the bottom of the wall. So always have like a gradient at the bottom of every surface, because that is going to help a lot, right? You're doing that with the stones already, which is good. But you also want to have some like dirt buildup with that as well. When you're doing these quarter sections and you're adding like your broken up cobblestone, right? Which is nice. You need to make sure that those two blend properly, right? That they look that they're part of like the same stone family, or at least have the same color, right? Cool. Let's see. And then literally, you know, wherever you have intersections, you know, have like a little bit of a blend going, right? every interaction between every different surface can have like a little blend, right? Because even this, let's say this barrier has been here for a while, people will kick stuff into it, right? Like little bits of dirt, little bits of pebbles. So having like dirt is going to help ground all of that stuff too. And also another rule, right? Another thing that I say a lot is big, medium, small. Very common. But basically, if we want to apply this sort of thinking, right? So let's say this is big. You have your small is going to be your dirt blending on the floor. We need to have something that is going to help us blend with the rest of it, right? It can be like a bunch of rope just like piled up next to it, which could work. But something to help us blend between the big, the medium, and then the small, right? Doing that gradient is always going to help. I love what you're doing here with that, right? Big, medium stuff, small stuff. Awesome. Keep doing that stuff. I think, honestly, a lot of your improvements now are going to be, like what I said before, more cluttering. Try to add interesting details. These kind of go like hand in hand, right? Look for cheap things that can add a story, right? The fishing nets we talked about last week or the week before, they are very versatile and they can add to the story of things, right? What I will say, lastly, if I can write, that would be good. I want to see a lot of polish on the textures, especially the floor, especially the blending between this surface and this surface, that surface, these two surfaces, right, that we talked about before. Make sure that everything feels nice and consistent when it comes to the saturation of the colors. Like everything needs to kind of like flow together like really nicely. Be really nice to look at, really nice and soft. So we can't have like something that's like very, very light next to very dark, because from a color perspective, that is gonna be very distracting, right? So we want to have some consistency going on there. So between surfaces, we want to have that consistency. This feels like Flea Bottom from Game of Thrones. It's very nice. Hell yeah. MH is saying ambient occlusion could be useful in this case. Yeah, I mean, in ambient occlusion, when it comes to like Lumen, right, like it's very difficult to like tweak it unless you revert and you override it with like console commands, right, that you can tweak it by yourself. I think honestly, what I would prefer you to do is do the blending, because we're sort of gonna use that blending to kind of mimic what ambient occlusion does, right? It's gonna blend and ground things together a bit more. And then we can see if we want to increase the ambient occlusion, but I don't think we need to. And then also to your question, so you got an out of the blue question, which is totally fine. That's why we're here. So if you have any question, feel free to just dump it in the chat and we can talk about it. How much percentage of a UV map island should cover an entire texture in AAA development? Is 70% considered enough as a rule of thumb? No. As much as possible. Honestly, like the higher percentage, the better. Like there is no rule. Like if you have like usually with very simple objects, you're probably going to end up with a lower percentage just because you have less islands to play with, right? Depending on the shape of the asset, of course. But you always want to aim for more. Like maximize your coverage of your UVs as much as possible. Because if you only use 70% of your UVs, right, and you still have like, I don't know, UV islands to kind of play around with and fill those gaps, you are literally telling me you're throwing away 30% of your texture space for no reason. So let's say we're working with like a 1K texture, you are sacrificing 300 pixels. That is a lot of pixels that we're just throwing out for no reason, right? We don't want to do that. We want to make the maximum amount, the maximum possible use of every texture that we have. Because a lot of this goes with pixel density as well, right? But always go for as much coverage that you can get, depending on the asset that you use, and then try to get as close to pixel density as possible, right? But it doesn't need to be 100% accurate with pixel density. If you are over pixel density, I would actually prefer you being over pixel density rather than you being on pixel density but throwing 30% of your UVs away or your texture size space away. If that makes sense. Powertail saying, very nice. When blending using decals for some stuff is still fine, like on the planks, just a dirt gradient. Whatever you need to do. Like honestly, I would always use vertex painting because vertex painting is super simple to set up and it's very versatile, right? You basically have your vertex painting set up in your master material. The only thing you do is you switch your two inputs, right? Most of the time. For the wall, you're going to use two different inputs. For the floor, you're going to use two different inputs. Blah, blah. That's why I love vertex painting, because you only have to do the setup once. With like a decal, I would really try to... If you're doing decals, I would go for specific use cases, right? So let's, for example, say a puddle is like a good use case, or specific leakage, right? Because those patterns is very difficult to replicate with just vertex painting. So yeah, I would always use vertex painting as like a base pass and then add additional decals wherever needed on top of things. Thank you for the answer. No worries. Thank you for the question. Cool. Thank you, Powertail. Got you. So like on the plank, for example, a simple darker vertex paint. If we're talking about, let's say, I don't know, let's say talking about this beam, right? We can first of all add a darker gradient coming from the bottom, right? Or you could even like blend a pre-existing texture like a dirt or something like that on top of it and make that darker. And then wherever you have like an intersection, right, you can then do something where, I don't know, this would probably be a decal where you have some like leaks. And then up top, you kind of can have your vertex painting again, right? Yeah, you can be very specific. And this is not something that you need to do everywhere, right? But try to do it in the areas where you are most likely to look at things. So, for example, this area up top here, that is probably going to be like a good area because that is literally where you're calling attention to, right? So spending more time on those areas and less time in like darker stuff. Meh. Cool. Thank you, Powertail. Thank you for sharing your work. Next up, we have Focus and Fractured. You will have to tell me who I'm looking at. Polish time, let's go. Because I keep forgetting. I know that we talked about this last stream as well. But if you could help me remember who we're looking at here, Focus and Fracture, that would be really useful. In the meantime, let me skip just really quickly and go for Yura as well. Because Yura is new. Welcome to the community. It's lovely to have you here. You asked a couple of questions. In these sessions, I only focus on one question. But since you're new, I'll give you a slight grace period. Yeah, awesome, Eisendrag. Saying welcome. That's wholesome. It's Byron. Okay, cool. Remember that for next. The one thing is, you had a question, and this is more like a discussion topic, right? But it can be hard to achieve your ideas that you have in your head as a beginner, right? Because there's always going to be so much learning, there's going to be so much technical stuff, there's going to be a lot of things that you need to do before you can achieve those ideas or bring those ideas to life, right? That is completely normal. That is just because in the beginning, your mind works way quicker than your skills can carry you, right? And that's because you don't have the technical expertise yet to get there. So this is why I always recommend for beginners to go smaller, because that allows you to kind of compartmentalize and focus on the things you need to do rather than get overwhelmed by just the scale of things, right? But that is gonna improve over time, but try to be conscious of that. But yeah, it is gonna take time. So that's like 100% normal. Don't think about it too much and just focus on the things that you do have in your control. Cool. Then some feedback as well. You're asking, what can I add or improve? I am going to throw like a couple of things at you. Most of it is going to be story based. I use story as a framework for a lot of the stuff that we'll be talking about, right? Stories can involve like the questions of what is this location, who has been here last, who is buried here, why are they buried here, when were they buried there, like all those things. And it might seem like silly questions, but if you can role play and think about those questions, that is going to help a lot when it comes to the actual brainstorming that you need to do for the assets, right? So use a story as a framework. For example, when you have an empty corridor like this, you have like the base setup is really, really good. But what are you trying to showcase in this corridor? Can we maybe do something else that is like more interesting, right? Maybe, I don't know, maybe this could be like the embalming station, right? Where they prepared like corpses to go into the actual crypt. They had like a little station set up here. And that's where they basically took people in, they made sure that they were embalmed, and then they take them back into like the main crypt area, right? Or maybe this is like a place that is overrun by like a bunch of skeletons, or a lot of people got buried here, or maybe the people got overwhelmed and they just started stacking like piles and piles of skeletons. Think like the underground crypts in Paris or something like that, right? Like some of those vibes. Whatever it may be. But think about the story that you want to tell with those elements, right? Cool. Let's see. Another thing that I wanted to add, and this is basically coming from your reference, right? You have this little space here in the back where it looks like she's almost at the edge of the water, standing on like a little bank that is not like in the water, right? I think it would be interesting to add that into your scene as well. Because right now, what is happening is that this floor looks like a glass surface because it's fully covered in water, right? But to make this surface more interesting, I think what we can do is around some of the pillars and maybe around like the central well, just add like a couple of islands where you can see like the stonework coming up and forming like little islands. This is because anything that contrasts is gonna add more interest, more visual interest to the scene, right? So yeah, that is always a good shout. Because yeah, when you're coming to these sessions, right, you'll hear me talk about contrast a lot. Whenever something is super similar, it usually makes sense to break it up with a couple of details or a couple of things that kind of break up the similarity of whatever it is, right? I'm trying to keep it like very broad because this can apply to like a lot of stuff. The same thing happens in the other direction as well. Whenever you have a surface that is super irregular, we need to then infuse it with some similar patterns so that we can ease the eyes a bit, right? So that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to add a visual interest. You are doing that here by like adding a bunch of bodies in here, right? But I think it can actually be more impactful that we only have, let's say, one body. We add a story to that specific body, right? So that you can kind of tell that this is like an adventurer that got stuck, and like you can still see the backpack and all that kind of stuff. And there's like a, I don't know, he was like writing a note or something like that. Rather than having like a bunch of people lying here, because that gives us something to actually look for rather than just set dressing, right? This becomes more impactful than just a full scene with just dead bodies, right? So yeah, have a couple of spaces where you just have like the tile work kind of coming through. Keep those vases, they look really nice to break up the scene a little bit. And then be very specific with where you want to add like little bits of story, right? Let's say a lover's couple, an adventurer over here, and that's more than enough, right? Cool. Yeah, but think about the story. Think about like how you can infuse certain elements, right? It could be literally anything, right? The stories or like the ideas that I was just thinking about, you can completely come up with your own thing, and the ceiling can be, I don't know, a bunch of cages that used to hold people prisoner. There's cages on the side, there's skeletons in them. You can kind of take it to whatever kind of place you want, right? Yeah, use a story to kind of guide you with that. Let me open the window real quick. Because it's getting hot. Right. Okay. Hopefully that was helpful. And welcome to the community again, Yura. And the music is matching the scene a lot. Yes. They opened up a whole new perspective for me. That's awesome. And already, great job with the scene, right? I think the colors, because that was also like one question that you asked, I think the colors are kind of spot on, kind of going for like a very somber mood, and that helps with like guiding the focus to where you want it to be, right? So that would be the last thing that I'll add here. You have like a really interesting focal point. What can we do to add some interest, right? Because you're basically telling us like, oh, look here. But then why do we need to look here, right? So add something there. I'm sorry, saying the scene's gonna be fire. Yes. Yes. Really good stuff, Yura. And again, welcome to the community. Love it to have you. Cool. Who was next in line? It was Byron, right? Let's have a look. Awesome. I didn't really spot like a question in your thread, right? Oh, I think there was one actually. I'm considering reworking the large pillar type. Maybe it's too much detail. It looks nice, but it perhaps it's a bit too much. That's talking about this guy over here, right? You are asking a good question. The answer to that question should almost always be, I'm gonna put it in the engine and I'm gonna see. Because there's only one way to tell, is by actually doing testing yourself and seeing with your own eyes, right? This is the thing, and I can't stress how important this is. This is the thing that I do when I'm working on environments. I do this like multiple times a day, going back and forth, because you need that iteration. You need that iteration of just being like, hey, I'm gonna put the pillar in there in the cheapest and quickest possible form, right? So let's say you have this idea of like making this really intricate pattern. What would be the quickest way for you to test if that is going to be very noisy in your scene, right? And try to get to that as quick as you can. So let's say even in this case, you're doing your high poly sculpt, you have the pattern, don't clean the pattern up. Just slap it on the pillar a couple of times, do a high poly export, get it into the engine, and just duplicate it a couple of times to as many times as you need it in your scene, and then see what it looks like. Right? This maybe sounds like really, really dumb, but a lot of people don't do this. If you feel like, not sure about this, get it in the engine. Always get it in the engine. Yeah, so like I'm saying here, test it in the engine as soon as possible, and this goes for everything. Everything you do, you want to test it in the engine as quick as you can. So don't wait until you have like your entire modular kit sculpted, because what you're basically doing, what could be a good analogy here? What could be a good analogy here? Okay, I don't know. Let's go with a baking analogy, right? Let's say you're making bread and you add like all the ingredients, but I mean, you're not really measuring any of them, and then you just like throw them in, and then you bake a bread for like an hour or two, and then it's like, oh shit, it didn't came out right. Yeah, that's because we haven't done like any of the measurement before, right? That's why we need to do this testing early on, so that we actually can get some data before we decide to then put a lot of our effort into it, right? Conceptual Vision is saying Decimation and Auto Unwrap and ZBrush my go-to. Yeah, honestly, whatever you need. Because it depends on the test, right? I wouldn't even texture it. If it just is about like the pattern, maybe you need to decimate it. Maybe. But you can just chuck it in the engine, you know? As quickly as it can. And again, this counts for everything, right? Everything in the scene. Test it as quick as you can. Because for all you know, there might be something weird happening where you're like, I think this pillar is too small. Or the pattern that I sculpted is like not that visible. And now, because you've tested it, you know that you need to sculpt your patterns like more intently on all the beams without having to sculpt like all the beams, right? So yeah, I do want to say, looks great. Looks really great. I like where this is going. I love the sculpt itself. So I think you're doing a good job. Just make sure that all the love and the effort doesn't go unpaid, right? You want to make sure that all of it is as close to the final result as possible. In a tested manner. Yeah. Cool. Hopefully that was helpful, Byron. And keep up the good work. Is that 3D code? No, I think there's ZBrush. I think it is ZBrush, Rio. You're always late for these? Aw, man. 3D code gang here. Let's go. I have not used... Well, first of all, I've not used 3D code in ages. And I've also not used ZBrush in ages too. I think I only used 3D code like once. Like 10 years ago, I think. Ages ago. Right. Next, we've got Eisendrag. So a reminder for people that are still in the chat, if you want to go first, and if you have added your name to the list, feel free to raise your hand and we'll talk about your stuff first. Focus and Fracture is saying it was ZBrush with the bone matte cap. Okay, thank you. The box. Yes, the box. Let's talk about the box. Because that's basically your main concern, right? Is it too boxy? And I was gonna relate it to doing like a lot of testing, right? And I think you're doing the good thing here by doing testing with your block out here. This is also one of those lessons that I cannot understate how important this is as an artist. Because for a lot of the time, you don't really have any accurate data or any accurate guidance of what you're doing most of the time. So you kind of have to trust a lot on your feelings, right? And if, let's say in this case, you feel that the room is too boxy, that's a great instinct, right? What you can do then as a test, save this out as a scene, right? Make a new scene, basically duplicate the whole scene, and try to get inspired by like real life locations, and see what you can do. See what locations you can find that make it less boxy, right? Because what is interesting here is that if you pay close attention here, they probably thought the same thing. That is why this space here is curving. It's not straight. So it's like an overpass or something, or like a tunnel that is like slightly curving, and that already looks like a way better than what a straight box would look like, right? Or whatever this building might be. I've not played the game, so I have no clue. But I'm assuming it's going to be an overpass or something. That does lead me to pointing out something here, because you got great references, right? But always, 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 always go for the real thing. Real references. There are so many awesome abandoned buildings. Well, in this case, it doesn't even need to be an abandoned building. It can be any building you want, like a really nice interior or something like that, that is not a box, right? And then try to see how it would look broken up, like you're doing, right? But yeah, always use real references for this stuff. I think the game reference is good to kind of get you kickstarted. But then what I want you to do in this case is like, okay, what building is this? Right? Like, what building is this? There must be like a real life counterpart. And then look at what they did. But yeah, I wish I could give you like a smarter answer than if it's too boxy. If you feel like it's too boxy, just change it up. That's what it comes down to. Because here's also a thing, right? I encounter this like so many times as I'm working on things. I will have this feeling where stuff is too flat. So what I do when it comes to like really flat surfaces, they really look boring and they don't make for like engaging gameplay, right? So what I do then is I start looking for opportunities, or you can call them excuses, to kind of throw something in there, try to tie it together with a story, and also tie it together with like more interesting gameplay purposes, right? The same thing that you're doing here, right? Like you could basically say like, okay, this box is just going to be a box here, and then we're going to have like a ladder going up. Cool. That would work, right? That's boring, right? So in that case, what you've done is just like, okay, we're going to climb on here first. We're going to go up here. And then there's going to be like, I don't know, another staircase up here or something like that. Or you're climbing in the rubble. Right, let's say this section is collapsed. You can kind of see it, right? But that makes for a more interesting and engaging way to assign to the player, like, hey, we need to get up here. How do we get there? Okay, need to go up here, need to follow this, and then up there. Cool. But yeah. And then you throw in like a more interesting location, and that makes everything a bit more engaging, right? Because what we're always trying to do is, and this is more level design actually, right? Is let's say, and it's not that like boxes are bad, because, oh my god, level designers will hate me if I call out that boxes are bad. But like, if you can make something more engaging by, let's say you have like a staircase here, right? It takes you up to the first floor, and then there's like, I don't know, broken rubble here. Let's say you're just doing this, right? That's okay. But if you want to make something more engaging, we need to think about like the flow of things, right? So that, like you're doing already, okay, climb up this box, we go up this staircase, and then maybe we go up this staircase here, and then we can kind of look at like, I don't know, other ways to break this up maybe, but you know, that already becomes like way more interesting, because now we're making the whole space a bit more engaging, right? And that's where the marriage of... Oh, I just realized that is all behind my freaking chat. So, sorry. Here's a zoomed in version. So, it's basically the boring version versus like a more engaging version, right? But yeah. That is basically the marriage of level design and level art in action, right? Because the level designer has a tendency to focus so much on gameplay, or at least in my experiences, they focus a lot on the gameplay, which they should, and then sometimes forget to make it like visually engaging. So we need to come together in the middle somewhere, because sometimes we make crazy shit that is like really hard to make like interesting, like proper gameplay around, right? So we need to turn things back, and they might need to engage with us a little bit so that we can make more engaging spaces, right? But the marriage of the two is beautiful when it comes together. Right. Cool. Thank you, Eisendrag. Thank you for sharing. A lovely little block out as well. But yeah, one thing that we didn't talk about, it was the opportunity of having the hole in the wall or like in the ceiling, right? And trying to pull that in. Almost seeing it as like, oh, there's an opportunity here to integrate the story or the location with the traversal, right? Beauty is saying, what if you want to change the pattern, but it's already there? What can be done without scrapping everything and starting from scratch? Well, on the previous example where that pattern was like hand sculpted and you're not doing it as like, well, so here's the thing. The first thing that I would do is I would never sculpt it in. Either make it a brush or make it a separate mesh or do something like that, because that's going to help you a lot already. Because you want that flexibility, right? If for whatever reason you sculpted it by hand manually into a pillar, well, let's just say you're going to learn that lesson really quick. Let's just say that, right? There might be ways to recover where you can like extract with a mask like that region, then turn that into a brush so that you can then use that for the future, right? That might still be a thing that you can do. There are ways around it, but a lot of this has to do with honestly learning things by doing the dumb stuff first, realizing there's a smarter way and doing it better next time. And then hopefully when you come to sessions like this, I can hopefully, in most cases, avoid you doing the dumb stuff first so that you can then go to the right direction in the first place, right? So try to separate things out as much as you can. So for example, for that pillar sculpt, I would separate it out as like a separate mesh. And then maybe integrate the two, maybe all the way at the end when I know that this is like the pattern size and the detail that I kind of want to go for, right? That's when I would integrate them together. But I would always keep it, I would always try to keep it as much as possible separated out as I can. If you see my thread in the whips, it's actually made with a pattern from polymodeling in Blender. It's interchangeable at the modeling stage, but integrated in the sculpt. Yeah. There's so many ways that you can do this, right? What I would do is I would use booleans for this. So I would make a pillar in Blender, make the pattern in Blender, combine them together with using booleans, and then once I would then export and do a whole bunch of testing, change the patterns to what I need to do, and then once I know that everything is set in stone, that's when I would make a duplicate of my modifier stack, collapse everything down in the copy, and then do a sculpt pass for the damage. That's the way that I would approach it. Umbrella is saying, damn, this project is coming on really nicely. I like the overcast with the naked trees. Yes, doing a really good job. Also, Yalmar is asking for our inputs on anything that sticks out at this point. I would still say that my main feedback would be, interestingly enough, and this is going to be annoying to a certain degree, first thing that I wanted to mention is I'm still missing wetness. I'm still missing that swampy kind of vibe, the reason why we have like a house on stilts, right? I'm still missing that. And that just comes from like the roughness variation. Because you've got some moss, which is looking really nice, but I do want to see some roughness variation where you can see like, you know, like the water line affecting this. And then also just, yeah, more breakup in the roughness, right? The second thing, the more annoying thing, is foliage. Why? These, I don't know what specific they are. Pine-looking thingies? I don't know what they are. It feels like they're in the wrong biome. Because these trees, you wouldn't really see in a swamp. Well, not in like where the water is gonna take over the roots of these trees for a lot of the year, right? If you had little islands, right, that would probably make sense. But yeah, this is one of those things where, to me, it stands out a lot. So I would potentially fix it, but it depends on what you have available to you, right? If you don't want to make them from scratch. I don't know if you made them from scratch or something, but yeah. But that's what I would look at, right? So there's a couple of options. Either you swap out the foliage, right, to make it more mangrove-y, kind of just like, I don't know, something more appropriate for what is a swamp, right? Or the other option is that you play around with the placement of those trees so that it can kind of make sense that they would be on land, and then maybe you would almost have to see what we can do with the scene in terms of placement, right? Because let's say this is our scene from the top down now. And let's say this is your hut with like the little staircase next to it. I would then say you want the hut to still be in the water. So that means that you need to make an island back here or something, and that's where all the trees could be, right? So that would be the second option that I can think of immediately. The Witcher has a really cool swamp map to use as a reference. Yep. Thank you for the shout out, Samar. That is awesome. But yeah, if you look at like the Louisiana swamps or whatever, like in America, there's so many good references for this stuff. But yeah, try to keep the foliage appropriate to the biome that it's a part of, right? Because I would still prefer to potentially swap out the foliage in this case, to kind of go all in on the swampy vibes. Conceptual Vision is saying there's for sure a cauldron in that hut, brewing up a good stew. Yeah, I don't know if you want to eat the stew though, you know? I'm very mixed on that. But there's definitely something brewing for sure. Witcher or Baldur's Gate 3 swamp mood for me. Good one. Yes. Maybe some wood variation and something in the focal area, more interesting shapes. Yeah, I think that's also not like a bad example, right? Like doing something with like the door like opening. And then more wood variation. I think, yeah, if you have so much wood, there's still so much layering that you can do, right? Like having like a darker layer here, for example, or just more breakup in general, that would always do really well, right? Like Yeah. Find some good references for this and try to replicate it, right? Like old, worn, like aged wood. It's going to have a lot of color variation. Those are some good shouts. But yeah. Awesome stuff. I like where this is going. Yeah. Good stuff, Hjalmar. All right. With a scary light coming out. Yeah, that kind of depends on the person, right? Because that was my go-to as well. But it depends on how solo you want to be, right? Because it can really quickly become like really cliche. But the idea of like a light coming outside of it, good idea. Right, people, I'm gonna need your votes. I'll be curious to see what you all think. So the question here is, and it's from Just Max. She's playing around with the main building. The main question is, which one do you like better and why? But feel free to tell me 1, 2, 3, or 4. And then, yeah, if you want to explain why, that's also good. Let's see. That makes sense. I kind of overlooked like real references. Yeah, for everything, you need to have real references. There's honestly like no excuse for like not using real references. Even if you have like a concept art, right? Like if you're following a concept art, try to get to the actual source of what they're using. Right? Because you're going to learn so much from just doing that. Hjalmar is saying, thanks, I've mixed around a little bit with the interior lights, trying not to make the light too cozy. Yeah, that's the thing, right? You kind of want to make it like very, very subtle, like very spooky, almost like candlelight, you know? We have a lot of votes for 3 and 4, which is good. And then Rio is saying, I like 1 because the others look like an entrance, but we seem to be inside of a place. Okay. Okay, I see what you mean. Interesting point. 2 or 4. The left building guides the eye through the scene, says Samara. 2 or 4. Yeah. Interesting. So it seems like a lot of people really, really like 4. And that is, interestingly enough, also the building that we had before as well. Cool. I do like the point that this feels like it's not an entrance. It's kind of just like a part of the space already, which is an interesting point. The interesting thing there is that I almost feel like with this one, we're talking about like a different architectural style, right? Because everything is like very curvy, very arch-based, and then we all of a sudden have this, which is almost, it almost feels like a very traditional Japanese kind of thing going on. Which is interesting. I'll tell you, what is my favorite? What is my favorite? It is interesting. I'm probably gonna be... I think also 4, yeah. Just because for me, what's really interesting is that there's a continuation between like the shape language of everything, right? And it does a good job of kind of framing everything else surrounding it. And we have like a nice bit of contrast coming along, right? Because we have this like very bright spot here, then it kind of takes you into like darkness again. So there is like a a pattern that we're kind of following. So it's like more dark in the background and then more lit up in the foreground. So we're getting that contrast working really well. Whereas in number 3, I think it looks like very interesting and impressive, but it almost feels like it's too much. Because it kind of obscures what is happening inside of it, you know? So that's why I'm not particularly a fan. It does make it feel like it's very impressive and important, right? But yeah. So yeah, it's interesting. There is something. Yeah, I think I'm torn between. I think 4 is still my preference, right? Let's actually have a look at 2. What is 2 doing? Yeah. It's not that I minded the destruction. It's just I think that it looks nicer where it's just like a bit overgrown. Yeah. So yeah, 4 is my favorite, and then I think the runner-up is going to be 1. Just because it's doing something interesting but different. Yeah. So yeah, what do I like at 4 is the contrast between light and dark, right? Then also the framing. Framing really helps well within that one. And I think, yeah. Make some notes. Two different, and yeah, with number 2, I don't think the destruction makes enough of a difference, or I don't think it really. It adds. I think this is going to be more of your choice. I think, like, I would probably be more inclined to go with this one because I like the way that like the full shape is kind of framing the most important part, right? Where this breakup, it kind of feels to me that it's probably a little bit out of place with the normal decay that we see in like the rest of the scene. Yeah. Those are my thoughts. Thank you for sharing them. Umbrella is saying 3 feels strong and the silhouette is clean. Yeah, I think there's something about this where it increases the importance, but I think the reason why I don't like this is, like I said, it's too busy, and the rest of the scene is kind of busy already with like the repetition of all the pillars. If you then start repeating the pillars on the main thing, there's no separation between, oh, there's pillars here, a lot of repetition, and then just an open space, right? That's probably, if I had to word it, that's probably why I don't gravitate towards 3. Because it's almost in this case, if I remove all of it, the repetition of the pillars is adding a good kind of intensity or repetition to the scene, and then you have like the big arch that's kind of adding rest to the scene, right? Whereas if you're doing something like this, it kind of has the same busyness as the rest of the scene has. Okay. Thank you all for voting. I appreciate it. Let's see. Where are we? Just Max. And thank you, Just Max, for sharing. I appreciate it. As always. Okay, Paulo. Next up. Does the altar concept help with the scene, making it feel more believable rather than a standalone art piece? Yes, I think what the altar is doing already, and like the lead up to it, it is giving you a foundation that you can use to build up on, right? You already mentioned this yourself, by the way. You wanted to add ceremonial props, ritual banners, and other kind of set dressing, right? I think that is perfect. Because that is basically what the scene is inviting you to do now, right? It is like, okay, we're setting this up as like an altar. What can we then do to kind of add and infuse like a little bit of story that goes with the altar, right? So I think honestly you're doing a good job here of giving yourself more opportunities, using the story as like a foundation to kind of build around. And then, yeah, I'm curious to see what you're going to build around it otherwise. Yeah, you can do something really cool with just, especially with this place. I would also use this place to, you know, do something with, like make like a really nice like circular pattern or something like that, and make that, you can do something really cool with like ground patterns, you know, where they have like a mosaic like ground pattern on the floor or something like that, like indicating like a that kind of hints at the story what's happening, right? You can almost hint at it where there's like this orb coming from the sky, and you can almost see it as like people are like worshipping around it. Building that into like an image that is just like mosaic on the floor can be like a really fun thing. Partially covering it up with sand because the civilization is no longer here. There's some really cool stuff you can do with that. But yeah, I think great job adding a strong foundation to keep building upon. So good stuff. And next up is Samara. Picking up the pace a little bit. Let's have a look at your work, Samara. I think initial reaction to the forest, really good. I like the way that you have like all these swirly, like flowy shapes. The main thing that I would do with those is make them a little bit more expressive, you know, especially on the big chunky boys, where you can have like a root kind of just like coming out. Oh shit, I don't want to too much, but like a root almost coming out and like digging into the soil, you know. Try to be a bit more expressive with those shapes. I think that's gonna help a lot, because I love what this one is doing, for example, where you have like a very expressive kind of shape going on with this tree. Oh man, it's so cool if it like went around again. Sorry, I'm just adding my wish list here. But yeah, those kind of swirls, good, right? I suffered with the shape of the trees. Hey, the creative journey is all about suffering. So you're doing good, you know? You're doing something good when you're suffering. No, it is difficult. Like I would recommend if you're not using it yet, using soft selection. Soft selection for this stuff is going to be really good. I love using. Oh, also another thing is edit edge flow. I don't know if you're using Maya, Blender, or whatever, but you have it as an add-on in Blender, where you can make really crude, very low poly adjustments, and then just cut shapes or like cut additional loops in the middle, and tell it to edit the edge flow, and it will do the adjustments for you. Like really good stuff. Really makes this kind of like organic modeling like 1,000 times easier. Emitsard is saying, I'm old and tired, so I go off. Yeah. Have a great rest of your evening, y'all. Thank you so much, Emitsard, and same to you. Thank you for joining us. Yeah, so look into the Edit Edge Flow add-on. Edit Edge Flow and soft selection. Right, but then the first thing, the question that you actually had was lighting, right? So the first thing that I would try is upping the light intensity. That might be a good shout, but you don't want it to be clipping, right? So try to increase the light intensity to see if you have like any sort of space for the values to avoid to not be clipping yet. If that doesn't work, maybe you have to try some post-processing. What I try to do here is to kind of indicate some differences between your work that's on the right and the concept that is on the left, right? And you can see the differences in the values, right? This is a really good thing to do whenever you kind of get stuck with like, there's something about like the comparison between the concept art and the stuff that I'm doing. What you can already see is that your values, especially when it comes to the background and the foreground, they are very much just very similar, right? If you look at the concept, you will actually see that there's way more contrast between all those different values. One thing that I also noticed is in your foreground elements, so these elements specifically, they are not as dark as you want them to be. So another good tool to compare is just looking at like, okay, these are the darkest spots. You don't really go that dark in your environment, especially if we then were to like rebalance some of the background to make it slightly lighter. You're gonna have some space to add some darkness back into the frame. But yeah, that comparison, doing this all the time helps a lot, right? Just turning it to black and white and seeing how you want your values to be. Yeah, you can see that the bright spot here is I kind of try to highlight it in green, roughly, right? And then if we go to your screen, you can kind of see what is happening in comparison, right? So that's a good way to compare the two as well. So use that tool to your advantage. That's cool. Yeah, it is, right? Conceptual vision. What does CSI stand for? Crime scene investigations. They often think about in concept art. I have no clue what CSI stands for. The curves? Yeah. Yeah, they use a lot of levels and curves and a histogram and like all that kind of stuff, right? To kind of see where the values are. A very simple entry to do this is just turning it into black and white. I was afraid of the scene being too dark. I think it's something that you'll have to try, right? Oh, okay. Yeah, like a histogram scan can also be really good. But here's the thing, right? I'll speak for myself. Is that oftentimes those tools can be really helpful, but if you don't know what to do with them, and this includes me, right? Like for the longest time, you could show me like a histogram of like an image, and people would say like, "Oh, this is wrong with it," and I'll be like, "What? What are you talking about? Like, how do I read this? What?" Whereas something like this feels a bit more in line with what we do, right? So yeah, because sometimes looking at a histogram scan or curves or levels and then having to adjust them, and it's just like, ugh, so complex. But yeah, you are right though. There's some really good tools to this. So yeah, thank you, Samara. Good job on the scene. Looking forward to the next updates. Next one we have Teapot. Welcome, Teapot. I think you are new to the community as well. Am I wrong? Let me quickly check here. Let me have a cheeky peek. May, yeah, you are new. Welcome to the community. Let's have a look here. So the question is, I would like to see what people think about the scene. What do you think about the competition if I'm telling the story I want to tell from it? Okay. We're going to focus on storytelling then. What I want to do first is I want to break down the story, right? Because you have a story. So the story is a family A family are escaping something mysterious in their house, and they have to frantically escape from it in their secret hatch. Okay, so that's the story setup, right? So there is like something happening, a monster or a murderer or whatever, and the family has to escape through a secret hatch, right? Now, what I want to do here is I want to think through the logic, right? Because if you have the murderer or the monster or whatever here, but the family frantically try to escape by making like a lot of noise and like shoving like a bunch of stuff out of the way, it kind of goes anti the idea that like they're trying to, I don't know, there's something about it where the monster hasn't caught up with them yet because it's still in the hallway, but then they did try to frantically escape already. Right? So there's something about those two things, because if the monster's still in the hallway, why wouldn't they close the hatch, right? First of all, why wouldn't they try to silently escape? You know, so it kind of feels like there's a disconnect between the story at that point already, where they might be getting chased. We don't know that. It's still in the hallway. And then we see a hatch being opened and the family jumping in, right? Or like the family has jumped in already. I think it feels weird. There's a disconnect there between the monster still being so far away, but then the family is still like frantically trying to escape, right? So I think to solve that, the monster has already caught up with them and is in the tunnel with them, or we need to showcase in like a very subtle way that they're trying to hide and trying to stay as quiet as possible. I think that could be like a very interesting approach here, right? Almost imagine, okay, so what I'm imagining is that, let's say the hatch is shut and we can see between the planks, and we can see that like people are trying to keep an eye out for a shadow that is being cast from like the hallway, right? So let's say there's like a really long like shadow that's being cast from the hallway. And then we kind of have to do like a hide and seek kind of game and see that there's people like inside here in this hatch. Right? Maybe that would make more sense, because then we're playing on the idea of like, oh my god, something's coming. We need to be as quiet as possible. Or we do the opposite and we say that the hatch is opened and we try to tell the story that the monster caught up with them and maybe something horrific happened because the monster like dragged them back into the living room, and you can see the aftermath of the monster catching up with them, right? Something like that. Because I think, yeah, approaching it from like a very logical perspective, that is probably what you want to display to the viewer, right? Because you can't do something really subtle on one end with just like, I don't know, something peeking around the corner or like a monster just being there, and then trying to do something very chaotic on the opposite end, right? Unless you're doing, I don't know, like I'm still trying to think. It almost has to be like an action kind of scene. You know, like we're trying to film it mid-action, but then if you're doing a still from it, then how do you make it feel like it's in action, right? The only thing that I can really think of, and this is not a great idea, is something where you have like a monster and then throw like a bunch of like motion blur on it so that you can almost see it like it's pouncing and trying to get into the tunnel before they close it, kind of thing. Right? But you can see what I mean. I'm trying to fix the logic of what is happening currently. And I think it needs to be more focused on, it can either be chaos and it needs to be full chaos, or it needs to be subtle and then it's going to be more like a hide and seek kind of situation, right? I think it's really difficult to do both at the same time. So yeah, hopefully that helps people. Yeah, but try to do some like role play, right? Like try to think about like, okay, if this is like a game setup or I don't know, a real life setup, like a horror movie kind of thing, you know, how would you set it up to make the most sense? And think through like a bunch of scenarios, right? Or even do like role play, right? Like if I was sitting in my couch and all of a sudden I see like, I don't know, like a shadow of a man with like a machete coming into like the house or something like that, right? I don't know, like a really movie scenario. What would you do? Right? You would probably try to be very subtle about it, because if you make noise, like they're coming to run at you immediately, and they can probably get to you quicker than you can get to opening the hatch and like removing the carpet from it, right? So yeah. Okay. Thank you, Teapots. Best of luck with that. A couple more. Oh, I didn't even organize your frames yet, brother. Next up from Harry. Harry is looking to see if something stands out at the moment. Okay. Right. The main question that currently stands out, even in a detailed blockout stage, right? And this is a great question to ask, even in blockout, because it's going to make your location stronger, is not looking at the reference, right? So we're going to ignore the reference for a while. But what is this location? Purely looking at the blockout. Because it becomes very, very tricky to try to decipher what the location is. I know that it's a factory, right? Like it kind of has like this old industrial kind of factory vibes to it. But what is the location now? Because we do have like this ladder going up all the way, or like scaffolding going up all the way. But it seems like some of the old industrial elements, or like, I don't know, those other elements still remain. So it is really weird, because I don't know what it's supposed to be yet. So I would think about what you want it to be, and think about what you can do to have it represented better. I know that sounds like very vague, but let's say if this is like an old factory that could turn into like a military outpost, what are some of the elements that we can do to increase the presence of the military, right? Or like increase the feel of the military. We can then start working with, let's say, searchlights, right? So let's say you have like a searchlight up here that's like controlled by the guard up there. Maybe there's like a searchlight up here too. Maybe there's like a watchtower. I'm just really thinking out loud, right? Like there's got to be better solutions for this stuff. But it's going to be more interesting, like visual things. So you can have like the watchtower, you can have like the floodlights. And then, okay, what's going to happen with this location, right? Because that doesn't look... Okay, so there is a door. So we have this door. Where does the door go, right? What can we do here? Maybe there's like a... If this is like an army base, maybe there's like a general armory, or like, I don't know, intake of equipment sort of thing happening here, right? With like a bunch of boxes. Like a bunch of those military crates, just having like a bunch of ammunition. Just like a standard box. You know, but you see what I'm trying to do, right? Like I'm trying to think, okay, if this is like a military outpost, what can I do to represent it better by trying to distill it to like its core visuals, right? And try to lean into those visuals more. So we're gonna have like an ammo dump. Or like ammo storage. Ammo storage, floodlights, There's probably going to be some like barbed wire up here. There's going to be, I don't know, this seems like an open space. Maybe there's like some tall fencing, you know, some like barbed wire kind of fencing happening. Maybe we can do something with that. Yeah. Conceptual vision is say Mexican cartel. Yeah. Same thing, right? Like if you want to represent like a Mexican cartel, the items that I'm adding here are going to be different, but you can still do something with those, right? It's actually an interesting exercise to really think about, like, okay, if we're going to swap, you know, this could even be, let's say it's the apocalypse, right? We're going very stereotypical, but even in the apocalypse, right? Let's say you still have like an established military. Let's say the American military, you know, easy example. Their base is going to look completely different than, let's say, like, I don't know, like an outlaw base that is still run by like survivors of like whatever this is, right? And you can lean in to what separates them, right? Because probably what you're going to notice is that the military here is more structured, more organized because they have their own scaffolding and all that kind of stuff. If this is a survivor base, they would be slapping whatever they can find on the street like together to make like some sort of fortifications, right? And leaning into those stereotypes usually helps people with understanding immediately what this place is supposed to be, right? So yeah. So you want to pick the core story, right? Or like the core fantasy or whatever you want to call it. The theme. And then distill it into assets. Right? And this skill, this stuff that I literally just was talking about for like, I don't know, 10 minutes, let's say. Doing this is probably one of the most important things that I had to learn when I wanted to work on like open world environments. The reason why is a player, if I'm standing here and I see something in the distance, I want to know what I'm going towards, right? Tall chimneys, smokestacks, all that kind of stuff. Factory. You know, you can name this for every sort of location or every open world game. They're going to be very deliberate with the way that they show you what the location is going to be from a distance, right? They call them weenies. They call them like points of interest. They call them like, I don't know, like there's all kinds of names for this. But basically, you want to have one asset in most cases that is a very good representation of what that location is going to be at a distance. So yeah, think about what you can do with that. And the best of luck. Next up is Ilya. I would love some general feedback this time. What would you improve if you have time? The question about the tulip remains. Ba-da-bum-bum. Right. So I think you're doing a pretty good job. You're doing a pretty good job. You're doing a really good job on just addressing the scene, right? I like the way that it's coming together. What are some of the immediate things that I would change? The immediate thing that I can tell is the water here looks good. Well, the addition of water is really interesting, right? You're trying to break up like the surface, which is good. But it looks too shiny or too similar. Or like too unbroken. It's almost like the whole thing is flooded, right? But that's not what you want. You kind of want to have like a little puddle that is still broken up and doesn't look like a mirror, right? Because if you spill water on like a wood floor, the wood floor normal or the pattern is still gonna peek through, right? So you need to be able to replicate that. That's like the first thing. I would also, you're getting to that stage where you want to really look at doing some very specific things when it comes to the post-processing, right? Or like start tweaking it and really start. Let's see, what can we do here? Really start playing around with it. Exposure maybe? Let's increase the exposure. We're gonna just combine everything here. Maybe a little bit more saturation as well. Brightness and contrast. Let's have a look. Let's see. And we're just playing around a little bit, right? Like, I want to be able to see a little bit more of the scene. But I kind of want to create, like... I kind of want to keep the spooky vibe that you have going on. So you can kind of see, I tried to lift it a little bit. It does look a little bit different on stream, but I tried to lift it a little bit so that we can see a bit more. Maybe the glint of the light coming in. Just a bit too much. But yeah, some light. Increase light, and then some post-processing. That's for you to kind of build upon, right? That'll be the second thing. And honestly, the third big thing, I'm gonna give some general recommendations, right? 3 is always look at straight surfaces or straight lines. That will be, I don't want to see any of them, right? Like none. So whenever you see one, I kind of want to break that up. And then the last thing is wherever you can, texture improvements. Right? Like how can you elevate, like for example, the metal here, maybe it's like a little bit scratched, a little bit of roughness breakup, like having roughness on these tiles at the back. Yeah, more separation. Yeah, roughness breakup is going to help a lot as well. Because yeah, if you look at some of these tiles, you can probably make them like pretty shiny. Same thing with like the exposed metal on here, for example. You can make that more shiny. And then contrast that with like the rest of it, right? Because the wood is going to be pretty dull, which is good. But then we're adding a little bit of shininess into the tiles, so it's going to be more realistic. And honestly, for all this stuff, find some real good real life references, right? Try to get as close to that as possible. Because this is a scene that is relying a lot on textures, so the better you can get at texturing, the better for the scene. Right? Couple things there. But yeah, really good progress on the scene. I love what you're doing. So keep it up and keep polishing it. All right, Umbrella. I did not prepare this by the looks of it. That's your old lighting, and then you just have some like screenshots here. I'm gonna just heat this one. Got some detail shots. We've got the big boy. Gotta take care of my OCD as well. Just something like this. Nice, nice, nice. I like where this is going. Let's have a look at your question. Feedback for the backroom area. Just watch back my feedback. Thank you so much. Really helpful. Thank you, Harry. And best of luck with the scene. It's looking really good so far. Really good block out. I like where it's going. Yeah, a really good stage to like fix some early issues there. But yeah, keep it up, buddy. What am I doing? I don't want that. Okay. Feedback for the backdoor area, texturing, lighting, proportions, believability, or anything. Okay, just basically general feedback. Let me see. Because I honestly probably I'm not gonna have that much. Because I can see what you're aiming for, I can see what you're doing to like all the individual pieces, all the individual elements of the scene, right? And I like what I'm seeing. I think it's just gonna be a case where, yeah, keep on trucking, dude. I think it's gonna be one of those. Because I think from what I can see here, the way that you're adding, I know that you're gonna add like details to all these surfaces, so I'm not too worried about anything specific at this point. Yeah. I think what I would definitely, one of the things that I would experiment with, probably the one thing that I'll say, I like what is happening here, right? Like the big surface breakup. Big surface breakup. But try to already do a trial on this area, for example. Like the tiles and the wall like have the shaders and all that kind of stuff set up so that you can already trial some stuff here. Because once you have that, once you know what you're going to be doing there, once you have a game plan, you're good to go. Well, that's the main thing I'll say for this week. Otherwise, you're good to go. Because I do like what I'm seeing here. Not happy with the sign and the railing yet. Trying to pick a design. Yeah. Yeah. I don't really have anything else to say there, Umbrella. Not this time around, at least. So, good stuff. I would say keep on going. I'm curious to see how you're going to be progressing with like the bigger surface area. That's probably the thing that I'm keen to see. What's going to happen with that? Darpan, last one for tonight. Short version for the story. The scene takes place in autumn 2025. After a sudden alien attack, 80% of humanity is gone. Survivors have formed up groups, and this subway station now works as a camp. Since no one knows when the next attack will happen, people are trying to gather and protect each other. The entrance is a first checkpoint with 2 guard stations here. There's also a wooden board where people have put up photos of missing family members. At the moment, I'm working on getting my modular asset to fit cleanly and feel connected. I'm also adding small points of interest to make the space feel more alive. My main references are real New York City subway stations. Cool. I don't have any specific questions, but I'm still refining things. Okay, when you're doing this setup, right? You have your location, you have your story, and you're starting to integrate the story within the location, right? Guard posts, checkups, and all that kind of stuff. Cool. What is really helpful for me here is we've talked about the story, which is good. You're leaning on that. The other thing is thinking about it from like a very logical perspective. I'll explain what I mean. And this is the second thing that I use a lot for ideation. And you can apply this to a lot of different environments. And it basically, the logic here is basically thinking about like, okay, we're humans, we're stuck in a subway. But what do we need to survive, right? In this situation, what do we need to survive? I mean, in most cases, we're going to need water. Well, we're definitely going to need water. Food. Light. Water, food, light, sleep. Protection. Right? Protection you got covered by the guard post already, right? Which is good. Yeah, I don't think they're gonna do. So I'm imagining this is a situation where like only 20% of people are alive. I think people's main worry. Yeah, no. I was trying to think that they're probably not gonna have a guard checkup like a guard post, but they might do, not because of the aliens, but because of other people trying to steal their shit that they have, right? So yeah, they probably do have a guard post set up, but trying to make it so that it's almost like a tier 2 system, right? So you have the initial gate here. That is something that they can close immediately if they wanted to. But you probably want something to kind of stop an intruder from like immediately rushing into this location, right? So what they'll probably do, I don't know, they'll set up something like if we look at the entrance from like a top-down perspective, right? Let's say this is the entrance, right? So this is where you want to go. They'll probably set something up to like slow down people. Right? Something like this, where if you're a person, you kind of have to like walk around in this way before you can get in, right? Because this is a way that they do to like slow down traffic. Let's say you have a bunch of survivors coming knocking for your supplies. They probably still want to have people in, right? So having some sort of setup to kind of slow them down. And for this, you can actually use a lot of like, let's say a queue system in like a museum, right? Look at how they do stuff to like guide the flow of traffic. The only thing that you need to do is probably make like tall barriers, right? Not small barriers. Cool, so we have protection is out of the way. Next thing, how did they get light? Right? Like what did they do for that? Probably generators, right? Generators require fuel. People are doing fuel runs. They probably have their own like light system set up, right? So there's probably gonna be a spot where there's gonna be like a generator with like a bunch of fuel canisters like next to it that is then hooked up to, let's say like a fuse box that is then hooked up to like some of the lights, right? And then maybe they have like another thing going on and connecting to, I don't know, some important equipment, whatever that may be, right? So we're thinking about a generator. We're thinking about fuel. Next up, water. They probably have like a storage area, probably even secured with just like a bunch of water, you know, that they have. Because think about it, right? Water in this case is probably going to be the most valuable resource. So they probably have it locked down tight and only available for the people that are around here, right? And then you have like a bunch of like water, I don't know, water canisters. Maybe you have like 2 or 3 like publicly available, right? And like a drinking station. And then you probably have like a person or like a desk kind of sitting next to it. Why a desk? Because probably one person is in charge of like keeping track of like how much water is going in and out, so that they can keep track of all this stuff, right? Cool. Water done. Food, same thing. I'm not going to do the same overpaint, but like pick an area where you have like a food station where people are cooking food that they have available, right? What do they have available? Think about that. And then sleep, there's probably going to be an area somewhere where they have like a space where people are going to be sleeping, right? Like a bunch of bunk beds or a bunch of beds that they kind of made. Probably bunk beds, because that's more efficient in terms of space, right? So you would probably see like a bunch of bunk beds in here. And that's the sort of logic from like a very human perspective. All right, like if we have like 20 people in here, how much stuff do I need, right? Because even without showing the people behind it, you can show a lot by showing the amount of food and the amount of water and all that kind of stuff that they have to indicate how many people are in this location. But really think about this and think about like how you can make this super interesting, right? Because even the way that you organize these, let's say even the organization of all of it, if it feels very clean, it feels very organized, we are hinting at probably military or something else, right? If it's chaotic, usually these are just like random people. And we can kind of lean into that, right? The same exercise that we did with Harry's work, where I want you to think about like some recognizable things, we can apply the same sort of thinking here as well. If let's say you do this very organized queuing system, that leans more into military. If you then have like a very disorganized kind of like setup where they're bundling the queue in a different way, or they just have a second gate, probably is going to be random people, right? So that is the top area of the shelter. The survivors are at the bottom. This is the first area where people enter and get checked. So should I add a water dispenser and a food distribution table here? If this is only the check-in, really try to make it feel like a security checkpoint, right? If this is... Okay, think with me logically, right? Okay, here's the way that I think about it. If I was a survivor and we're doing some like live roleplay, right? I know that in like World War II and all those kind of things, they had like underground bunkers, right, to take shelter. There's a big difference with that though. I don't think people would actually be more secure in the tunnels. I think they would be more secure in the check-in. The reason why is this. We have the outside world, right? And they can literally come from like any place that they want. Like people can come from like, yeah, all over basically, right? Then you have your funnel that goes into your space, right? So this is like your shelter. Then you have another funnel, right? Like once you had your tickets checked and all that kind of stuff, you have another funnel, and this connects to tunnel systems, right? Which means that we have another security risk because people can come from here and here, right? So I don't think... Maybe I think people would actually take shelter here if they're with a small group, and then if they're with a bigger group, then they can maybe go here. But the issue is, if you're only... There's a bunch of things here, right? Depends, and I'm not going to go into them all at once, but a couple of things that I want you to think of. How long have they been here? How big is the group? And yeah, how many other people are surrounding them, right? Those would be some things to think about. Because if they just moved in, it's very unlikely that they moved down into the tunnels, right? Or maybe they moved into the tunnels. But here's the main thing that I'm thinking about is when you make an environment, what is going to be the most interesting thing to showcase, right? Because I would love to see you expand this area so that I can see everyone in this place. Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Your scope depends on the story that you want to tell, right? You can keep your scope super small. And that's why I'm saying, think about the amount of people that are here, right? If it is 2 people, let's say a father and a child, your scope is way smaller. Because the only thing that they need to do is they need to close the gate and they're safe, right? So that's an option. If you want to tell a story about like 20 people, 20 to 30 to 50 people, something like that, you're going to need to add a lot of scope just to make sure that this is a believable thing, right? That's why I'm saying, think about the amount of people, because based on that, that's going to decide your scope. So yeah, I hope that was helpful. Some stuff to think about. But yeah, I would say a best of luck with that, Darpin. All right. Unfortunately, I do need to head on out. So yeah. I was hoping for a group of 20 people and 1 month passed after the abduction. 20 people is already a lot, right? If you think about it, like if they all need food, water, sleep, and all that kind of stuff, that's already a lot of food, or like a lot of stuff that you need to make, right? So yeah, think about it. Think about it. All right, people, I'm gonna head on out. I wish you a nice evening. I will post all of the feedback in our channel. Just a reminder for people that you don't know, go check out beyondextend.com if you want to become a member yourself and get weekly feedback. I want to get you into the games industry because it's awesome to be working on games. So if that sounds interesting, go check out the website. Talking about the website, we will be launching a new version of it tomorrow, actually. So I'll make a couple of announcements and be like, I think the Japanese say this, right? Like, be excited for when it releases. All right. I'll see you all tomorrow for the leads to the new websites. And yeah, take care.